think that's where we have to take away the transaction conversation first. Everybody in this room knows there's going to be a transaction because it's going to appear on a network, and networks are supported by advertisers. The big question is, how are we going to actually make this happen? You know, there are a few pioneers here. There's Erwin Gottlieb, there's Peter Tortorisi, Brian Turkelson. I mean, there are guys here that have been doing this for years in our country. The next part of that, I think, reflects on the strike that we had for that period of time. I think we all learned a big lesson from that. One, that advertisers took money back and put it in their pockets, and two, found that there was audience erosion. How are you dealing with that at this point in moving forward in shows where you do see advertisers and you work together?
Well, I think, you know, again, it's sort of we're in the frontier times of it, and certainly the guys you mentioned have been at the forefront of it, and I think have themselves been, you know, really pushing us also. I mean, I wouldn't just say, oh, you know, the brands or people haven't been open. I think on our side, we haven't been so open, and we've been tripped up in a lot of, well, this is the creative process. And, you know, again, I think Ben has really set the tone at our company, and he's really walking the walk. You know, he's saying, we want to be in a relationship with you. We want to bring you closer to the content. You know, how much of that was bound up in the strike? I think you can't separate the strike from, you know, the recession that I think we're all feeling, this sort of turbulent economic times. And I think, you know, again, it's about remembering that, you know, you can still have a huge breakout hit on an American scale and then ultimately on a global scale. And it's looking at the marketplace now globally and thinking about, you know, yeah, maybe your audience has eroded somewhat from a nightly American audience perspective, but look at what happens when you can take a show and have it all over the world, and your products could be seen all over the world. That's a really different relationship.
Katherine, which your relationships between clients and agencies? The question has just come from the floor, which is easier for you to deal with, the client direct or through the agency?
That's not fair.
I think, you know what, honestly, it's about the personalities and the goodwill going in. I think that it really, you know, the attitude has got to be one of a long-term, it's a relationship of faith. I mean, one of the things that somebody like me never talks about in these kinds of things is the shows that fail. You know, there's a lot of times it's a failure business. There aren't any metrics. You can't sort of say, oh, here is how we create a hit show. You know, anytime you do that, usually that show fails. So, you know, it is, sometimes you're gonna make some fantastic deal, and, you know, the creator is gonna embrace it, and it's gonna be, you know, you're gonna have your brand in there, and you're gonna get a ton of press for it, and then the show will fail, and that's part of the game too. And again, that's part of that global focus. It's you know, you just don't know. You ultimately don't know what's gonna work and what's not gonna work. And, you know, you just have to, if you believe in the show, you work very hard to make that show happen, but sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes great shows fail.
Yeah, there's one thing that I think gets factored into this is, you know, brands and agencies don't get the education of creating content, okay? They create the ability, or a creator have the ability to speak to someone about something. You guys have no rules. Is it a great idea? Is it not a great idea? In closing, one thing I think that was very interesting, when Ben made his deal at MSN, he sat on a stage and in the first year said, it's the first time I've had the opportunity to sit in a room with all the advertisers, and was really excited. The second year, which was last year, he said, you know, the networks don't get it. I'm here, we're gonna have that dialogue. And 2 months later, he took the chairman's job at NBC. So I think what that says, and resonates very clearly, is there is a closer bond. And I don't misunderstand this. I think your invitation here today is a really robust one. You know, talk to her. You know, if it's going to work, you got to talk to her about it.
Yeah, and okay. I think the last thing I would say in closing that's also changed on our side, again, to take some of the responsibility for how the relationship has worked on our side as well. You know, I've seen with writer-producers, I think the market is so tough right now to get a show through the system. There's so much competition. We are making fewer shows than we used to. They get it. They realize that if their show brings a larger value to the studio and the network, that show's going to have a leg up. In a jump ball situation, that show is going to be chosen. And so they're very savvy. They get this. They are not, you know, if they were just pure artists, they'd be off writing their novels. You know, they're in this because they understand it's a business. They understand that they need to get their show through however they can, and they realize that, you know, using a real brand relationship is another piece of getting their show made and getting it protected through the system. So, you know, they're much, much more open than they've ever been before. And again, they're open when it's that two-way dialogue and when they feel heard and when they can say, you know, I know we talked about using this brand in this episode, but here's why I can't use it in this one. I'm going to use it in the next one, you know, and having it be much more fluid. And so I think, you know, there's an openness on both sides at this point. And I think, you know, ultimately, I would just say to all of you, it's still going to be very tough. We're still very much in the early stages of it. But I do believe that's how we're going to get to this next place where we end up. That's where the sort of turbulence we're going through right now we need to help each other through it, and that's how we'll make it.
Thank you, Katherine. You may well have just preempted one of the questions from the floor, which is, how the hell do you get your writers to do anything for brands? Because they throw up their pens in a panic when it comes to a commercial
The market's just too competitive now.
You just tell them, don't you?
Yeah, they're sad. Well, yeah, I mean, first of all, you just say, shut up, do it. But then you say, no. And the truth is they do understand. I think, as I said, the top-down structure didn't work for them because they weren't able to make it their own. They didn't feel that it helped their shows. They didn't feel that they got any benefit for it, frankly. And you know what? A lot of times they didn't. The network would get the benefit for it, and the shows would literally not get a dime. I think now in this case, they realize, you know, with production costs going through the roof, with competition rising, with the audience fragmenting, any way they can get a leg up in the business, they're going to do it. And I've really seen that sea change in the time I've worked in the business, for sure.
Katherine, thank you very much.